And welcome once again to EWTN's Bookmark. Our special guest authors internationally are Ulf and Birgitta Ekman, authors of The Great Discovery, Our Journey to the Catholic Church, published by our friends at Ignatius Press. Welcome to EWTN and EWTN's Bookmark. Great to have you here. And certainly with our launch of our EWTN Nordic website recently, it's great to have a couple from Sweden here visiting us, and it's great as Catholics around the world, let alone in the United States, to be able to see the reach of the church, and especially talking about a couple who were very much involved with the church, but not the Catholic Church, right, Ulf?
Exactly. My background is I became a believer when I was around 20, living in a very secular nation, but with a rather strong state church, the Lutheran Church. That church has been more and more secularized over the years. I became a priest, or a pastor, we say priest in Swedish actually, and a chaplain at the University of Uppsala. And then from there started a charismatic non-denominational church and got involved in evangelization and missions.
And what about you, Birgitta?
So yeah, I was a Methodist girl and brought up in India on a mission field.
Right, I read that. That was it. So you only grew up from 10 years old on, right?
In Sweden,
right.
yeah.
Okay.
And then in my later teenage or early 20s, I rededicated my life to the Lord and met Ulf a few years later. Married him.
Now it's interesting because the foreword's written by a good friend of ours, Cardinal Anders Arborelius, who did a series for EWTN a number of years ago. We're very proud of him being named a cardinal in Sweden, as I know you are as well, and many people, even non-Catholics, are proud of him being named. Now he wrote the foreword to the book, and he mentioned that there was some pastor, Ulf Ekman, who was complaining about Pope John Paul II when he visited Sweden. That wouldn't happen to be you, was it?
Yes, it was.
Okay.
Definitely.
So what changed?
Well, this is a 15-year change. But the background, of course, the Lutheran background was staunchly anti-Catholic. The charismatic, the free church movements, Pentecostals all also were at least very critical of the Catholic Church. So that was a part of our theological thinking and also our social and cultural thinking. So the Catholic Church is not really on the map in Sweden. It's always been a small church, and of course for many hundreds of years it was forbidden. So that was something that we lived with. Then of course John Paul II came to Sweden. This was 1989, I think.
Right, exactly.
And so we had a prayer meeting where we wanted to be absolutely sure that he was, if he came, he should come and preach the Word of God, you know, unadulterated. You know,
Not this Catholic stuff.
This is very staunch evangelical position.
Right.
Many years later, I found a book with all his sermons from Sweden. So I flipped the one that I wanted to see, and I was shocked how evangelical, how biblical, and of course Catholic it was, you know.
Right, exactly.
But that's so. But I would say I was not, because we were not involved in any anti-Catholic movements. There are those, you know, but we were very critical at that point.
It's interesting too, Birgitta, in the foreword as well. The Cardinal mentioned about this book is a testimony to how two married people, and it is utterly essential to emphasize that there are two unique people together, but nevertheless with full respect for the integrity of the other, went through a demanding and deep personal process of testing and conversion. So you did it as a couple, but you had to come to it separately, right?
Yes, we both of us, we studied, you know, in different subjects, I would say, and were drawn, both of us were drawn strongly towards this that we longed for, and we didn't know exactly what it was. At first we thought it was maybe reconciliation with the old Swedish Lutheran Church, but more and more we saw that no, it's actually goes deeper. We have to go further, and but it was parallel. We went parallel all the time, I think.
Yes, we did.
And also the idea of, for you to make a step like this, not only stepping out into the Catholic Church in a country that, like you said, isn't very Catholic, but you were walking away from your own church and ministry that you had built up. How did that impact only your lives, but also the people you left behind?
It was the thing that made me delay my decision, because I was not. I went from being very interested in the Catholic Church to try to use the knowledge I gained from the Catholic Church to understand that, well, this needs to be used in a context, and I cannot just take it. So we approached and came closer, and then I started to wish that I could become a Catholic, but really thought that I cannot because of the ministry we have. Until we finally came to the point where we understood that we had to be Catholic. Of course, it's hard to secure a situation like that, that everybody will understand, that nobody will feel hurt. So some felt hurt, some were very upset, others were very understanding actually. Some people would say, well, it's your decision and it's a personal decision. Tell it as a testimony, but don't tell us it's the truth.
I see.
Yeah.
Okay, I was going to say. Now, also, one of the points the Cardinal makes in the forward here, he said, one does not become Catholic for emotional reasons.
No, absolutely not. It has to be the truth that you're searching for. We were searching for the original, and it was hard for us to accept that Jesus founded the church on Peter. Many evangelicals say that what Jesus said, on this rock I will build my church, then he's not meaning Peter, he's talking about the word.
Right.
So that was our position for many years. But then more and more we saw, no, he actually founded the church on Peter and his successors. So that was quite a revelation to us.
Yes, it was.
And also, talking about what we did earlier, he makes the point that one who becomes Catholic should not do so because of discontent with his former denomination.
Exactly. And we can honestly say that the life that we have lived from 1983, when the Word of Life was founded, and the missions program that expanded into Russia, Eastern Europe, and then on to other nations as well, was something very fascinating for us. We wanted to live for Jesus, wanted to preach the gospel, and to especially give the gospel to those that possibly never heard. And we had those opportunities in Albania, in Kazakhstan, and in many other places. So this was very fulfilling. But in this fulfillment, for me, it became, okay, we saw these different congregations grow up. Some of them we were involved in, others, they grew up spontaneously, came to us and wanted our help. We started Bible schools, and we tried to have leadership training, especially for young pastors. But the more I was working with this, the more unfulfilled I felt that I don't have the answers to them. And questions like, what is authentic authority? What magisterium? I mean, even the word I didn't know at that time. But who will decide in matters of teaching and discipline and morals and dogmatics? Well, that wavered and that changed for, depending on what person. So all this.
How could people who of goodwill, who feel directed by the Lord, read the same scripture and have different ideas
so
of
many
what
different
it
meanings,
means?
So many different meanings and so many different ways of doing it. And so this came to, I would say, an existential problem for me. Are we really doing this the way we want to preach the gospel, but are we doing it in a context that the Lord is pleased with? And is this what he wanted when the church was founded? So those questions came to me more and more and more.
Now, you expanded, as you mentioned, you did a lot of missionary work, and you ended up in Jerusalem. Now, was that something that you were driven more towards, having had that missionary background, or was that something both of you felt called to?
I think we both were equally, because she has the background, of course, and which is so good and so complementary, so and the experience. But we were, I think, from the early, when I became a Christian, when I had a conversion as a young man, missions were very strong immediately.
It's interesting too, because we don't think about a lot of people in Sweden going out planting churches. But the other thing was interesting about your time in Jerusalem is that you actually got to watch EWTN. Is that correct?
Yes, yes, we did, and it helped us so much.
I think we discovered EWTN in Jerusalem.
Yeah.
At that time, we'd come to a point where we had also the freedom. We started a study center in Jerusalem, but we also came in contact with Catholics everywhere in Jerusalem all the time.
Yeah.
And in that situation, we heard about EWTN and started to listen to it, and it became like a catechesis for us. I don't know how many. I think we watched thousands of programs.
We had a notebook on the table, writing down addresses and websites and whatever you talked about, and it was so good.
Now, you've got here Dennis Searby,
Yes.
Who says, perhaps the story of Catholic converts in secularized Sweden will be seen as particularly attractive to already believing Catholics, but I would rather hope that Ulf and Birgitta Ekman's Protestant brethren will also read it, for it shows a pastor and his wife grappling with very real problems of ecclesiology and theology, etc. Now, your book was originally published in Sweden. It's in, what, in 8 different languages now?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So have you found people like that, Protestants reading the book?
Many.
Okay.
Yes.
Many, and it's getting just more and more, I would say. So many Catholics read it, but I would say especially Protestants, because this is in Western Europe the question of how do we survive? Where do we go from here? How do we get deeper? Is very vital questions for so many pastors, and it's almost like a frustration. So we have heard many testimonies of the book. Maybe that did not become Catholic, but they became open.
A better understanding of Catholicism,
Yes.
maybe getting rid of some of the canards that are in
Exactly,
there and
exactly.
misunderstandings,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
Exactly.
And starting to search for themselves.
Now, you wrote this book together. Now, you've written 30 books over
Something
the
like that,
years.
yes.
Now, had you participated in those books as well, or is this the first one you've worked on together?
No, I have helped him with his books, proofreading and editing, and so I've been engaged in them, but he wrote them, of course.
Yeah.
I did some children's books.
Right. Now, in this book, though, did you split chapters up, or how did you work to get this together?
Well, we outlined the story, and then we said, well, what is your point about this story? What is your point about this? So we compared.
Were you surprised sometimes that you had different perspectives on the
Yes,
same
yes,
story?
yes,
Because
yes.
there is a chapter where I read you're describing a situation, and then it's not that you picked up from where he left off. You actually went over the same
The same
thing
from
from
another
your
viewpoint.
perspective. It was kind of
Exactly.
interesting how it was different, right?
Yeah. It is 2 independent stories in one way, but they weave together because we're married, and it's one decision that comes out of it together.
Right. So what happened in April of 1992 in Albania?
Oh, that was a very fascinating time, because after the Iron Curtain fell, we had an amazing opportunity. We had trained about 2,000 young people in our Bible school in Uppsala to be prepared to go out on evangelistic and missionary teams. Then the Iron Curtain fell, and we had the opportunity to go into Russia and into different parts of Soviet Union, Eastern Europe, and then we had, which is a really unparalleled in one way, opportunity to come into Albania while Albania still had a communist government. There was 1 or 2 Democrats that had just came into the government, so they were on their last stretch, so to speak. I mean, you could sense that Albania was going to fall, and we negotiated with the government to have to bring in a choir, to rent a stadium. And then we said that the man that helped me said, well, my pastor wants to come down and have a little speech. And so we did, and they gave us the opportunity to preach the gospel 2 hours. There's only 1 channel in television, only 4 hours of every day, and we got 2 of those hours, and to really fully preach the gospel to the whole nation. And the president got quite upset, tried to stop it, but he couldn't do it. They wouldn't let him to.
Now, were you surprised in those situations how many people were either open to the message or in some ways still closet Christians?
Many closet Christians.
Right.
Yeah.
I know you talked about that one story and that one particular thing where the man came up to you and said, I'm a Catholic too,
Exactly,
right?
Exactly. And that was for me, it shook me, because right in the middle of this, we came down as evangelicals and charismatics, and I had no thought about the Catholic Church. And here comes this man, and he was actually the secretary to the coming president at that time. And he was so happy, an elderly man, and he said, I've been to the meetings, they were wonderful. I'm also a Catholic.
Right, right.
And for me, it was like, I'm not a Catholic.
What? Right.
But I think the Lord used this experience.
Right.
It shook me. Okay, I'm not a Catholic, what am I? So it went through my mind very quickly. Well, I'm a Lutheran. in justification at least. Well, but I'm also Methodist when it comes to sanctification. Baptism, well, I'm not a Baptist really, but you know, and this went like raced through my mind. And I thought, oh, these different groups.
Right.
How am I going to explain this to him?
Right.
And that never left me.
Right.
Why are we so many different groups?
Now, you came to the States. Were you both in the States for a period of time, or you just
No,
were in
that
the
was him.
States? You were in the States for a period of time.
Yeah, I was.
Okay, and also Chuck Colson. How did he have an impact on you?
Yes, his book about his conversion came out early 70s, I think, or late 60s, something like that.
Right after the whole Watergate mess.
Exactly,
Right? Yeah, sure.
exactly.
Right.
And I was in the United States 68, 69 when, of course, Nixon was re-elected.
Right.
So that was very familiar to me. I read the story and I had just become an active believer, but I had no idea about the impact of evangelical Christianity in America like this. So that book meant a lot to me. But also, then he wrote a book about the church as well, and that book opened up for me that you have a tunnel vision when you're in your ministry or in your organization, and Colson helped me to see much broader.
Right, and I believe it's true. The Colson's wife was Catholic, and the word always was that he probably would have converted at some point, except with his ministry and what he was doing, that they thought it was best for him not to necessarily make that final step. Now, not to stay with you, Ulf, but in Hawaii, you had a very interesting experience.
Yes.
You talk about.
That was very unusual. We came there for some meetings, and I woke up. I had jet lag. I woke up very early. So I took a walk down Waikiki Beach in Honolulu, and then I walked back, and I saw this church, and it was open. And as I looked in, because I can just go in and sit and pray a little bit. And as I went in, it was full of people, and they did something that I've never seen before, that I later understood were Eucharistic adoration.
Right.
I'd never seen that before, but as a charismatic, you know, I mean, we're very sensitive to how we feel in the presence of the Holy Spirit in the meetings and so on. So I sensed this very strong presence of the Lord, and I could not figure it out. And it stayed with me a long time. And then I started to understand, yes?
Yeah, I remember when you came back to the hotel room and said, I went into a Catholic church.
Yeah, because you were sleeping and
I
you
was
went out
sleeping
on
and he was
right,
out walking.
And
he said, there was such a presence of God in this church. Isn't that strange?
Right. How could that be?
How could that be?
See, that's sometimes we would find as a Catholic, if you would sometimes would go to another church, as beautiful as it was, there was this sense that there was something
Missing.
This presence that wasn't there.
Exactly.
Right, and you feel that,
Yes.
that difference like that. So how was it that you finally decided to swim the Tiber, as they say, make that decision? Because again, obviously you have your own ministry. This is something you come grips with. What about relatives, friends, parents? I know your brother helped you, was one of the ones who got you involved with the charismatic renewal and stuff like that. So how did you go about making that decision and then being able to tell not only people in the church, but maybe relatives and friends?
Yeah. We talked to a few. When we knew, within a year we have to take this step. So then we started to prepare our surrounding, our sons, 4 adult sons. And they were not, they didn't object. They listened to us, and one of them actually became a Catholic before us. Our youngest son, he was.
Oh, really?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
yeah.
Benjamin. He was, and
He did that on his own. It was a parallel story.
he's a theologian. He's studying, and so he did that. But and then we talked to our co-workers and prepared them, and it was not easy. But
I think that it was not easy because they, in their thinking and our thinking was, well, we have all this, why should you leave that? And some would say for something less. I mean, this was the idea. With all this renewal streams. But for us it was the lack of the sacraments. This was the really deciding and also the dividing factor. Either we have the sacraments or we don't have the sacraments. If we have them, then anybody can anybody administer the sacraments,
exactly.
and what are they in essence and in function, and all these things we studied quite a bit. So I had this discussion with a Catholic priest, and I said, you know, if what the Catholic Church is saying is true, that you have the sacraments in the way that we do not have them, then I want to be a Catholic. And he was, well, maybe have to, you know, he was, well, he didn't want to push it, of course, and he wanted it to be my decision.
Right.
But for me, it's the feeling that I'm outside of something that I definitely do not have. And if they are for my salvation, it actually hinders my salvation. I need them.
Right. But you make the point is, and something that I think you said impressed you, was none of your Catholic friends pushed you to convert. They said you have to decide what's right for you.
Yeah, exactly.
And that was important to you, that they reacted that way.
I think so. We never felt we were proselyted. No forced conversion or just kind of push us into something. There was no triumphalism involved whatsoever. And they were very open and actually understanding of the work that we were in.
Right.
But also, of course, seeing the problems with it and the lack of it, and but letting us decide.
Right. Now, you wrote a whole chapter dealing with Mary. Was she a stumbling block for you?
Absolutely.
Okay.
And yeah, the biggest, I would say, for a Swedish.
Because you talk about even when you went to Rome, that you kind of were interested in the architecture things, but there were all these Marian images and stuff there.
Yes, it was disturbing to us then.
Right.
So, as a Swedish Protestant, you absolutely have to do research and see, is this so vital with Mary? And of course it is. I know that now. But it took a couple of years of studying St. Bridget's writings and her life story, and then more and more about Mary, and to understand the great dogmas that differ between the Protestants and the Catholics, with her Immaculate Conception, perpetual virginity, those things that normal Swedish Protestants don't believe. And I couldn't become a Catholic until I understood and accepted this as a truth.
That's the truth. Yeah.
So it took a couple of years, but it was an eureka moment when I saw it, when I understood it. Wow!
But for us, it's because we have many friends that are converts. For us, I think Mary came up in the forefront immediately. It was not like many Protestants say, "Well, this is the hardest nut, and we'll
kind of deal it as we go along."
Exactly.
Right.
For us, it was like we had to take care of this. We had to understand this, and if not, we would not be able to go on. So I remember you got very happy one day.
Yes, extremely happy when I saw that it's not against the Bible. You know, as charismatics, we want everything to be in the Bible, chapter and verse. And when I saw that this doesn't contradict the Bible at all, but you can see so much about Mary in the Old Testament and the New Testament that I hadn't seen before. But when the whole picture came together like a puzzle, no pieces were missing, it's all a great picture here. I was so happy, grateful.
Also, of course, it changed our thinking of the scriptures. That the scriptures that, oh yes, we believe the Bible is the Word of God, but does that mean that we read it the right way?
Right.
I think that is an assumption that Protestants do. We believe it, therefore we read it the right way. But we don't necessarily. And then, of course, the sola scriptura understanding that everything has to be explicitly in the scripture. It doesn't have to. John Henry Newman helped me a lot there.
Right. And you talk about the Via Media and how he started there and realized that wasn't enough to some degree, even where you might have been at one point.
Exactly. Yeah.
You know. So when you're in Sweden, so how are you received there? I mean, in a fairly secular country, you may have some friends who are Catholic, etc. Maybe there's a small group again. But I mean, how are you looked at as being, well, you're nice people, but you're a little befuddled? Or how do they view people there who maybe have your belief system at this point?
Do you mean how do secular people?
How do secular people kind of view you who are dealing with you? Do they think you're more benighted than you were before, or just believing it all? Or are they interested and wonder why someone like yourself would would make that decision?
I think this is the last thing. We've noticed that they're intrigued because for sure they know, most people we came in contact understood that this was a big step for us, and that it was not a step that we could have just eased along, got retired, kept on doing what we're doing, and be open, ecumenically open and so on. But to take that step and to meet another challenge, maybe possibly stronger than all the other challenges we'd had, that intrigues secular people.
Who actually are searching for something,
exactly.
even if they're not sure what it is.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, we're sure that it was great that you wrote this book, and we're sure that you've done wonderful work and continue to the people of God, and certainly, hopefully now in the Catholic Church. And we look forward with our initiative in Sweden, with our website, etc. Hopefully expand that Nordically, and we're doing some other things in Germany and more things in Poland and other places. The Lord is opening a lot of doors. It's amazing.
This is wonderful.
All from Buckle of the Bible Belt here in Irondale, Alabama, all begun by that wonderful nun, Mother Angelica. Thank you so much, Birgitta. And Ulf Ekman, the authors of The Great Discovery, Our Journey to the Catholic Church, published by Ignatius Press, available through the EWTN Religious Catalog. EWTNRC.com is the place to find it. You'll find us next time, right here on Bookmark. Thanks.